Namaste, Sadhana Panchakam. Sara Shiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Parantyam Vande Guru Parampara. Starting with Shiva through Shankaracharya and my Acharya, the Guru Parampara eternally flows. We will be using this sloka in all of our classes. It talks about our parampara, our lineage of teachers. It begins with Shiva, who is an incarnation of God. This means that the knowledge that was taught by the ancient rishis was not invented by the rishis. It was discovered by the rishis. In actual fact, everything is discovered. And this is because nothing is made up, because all knowledge comes from God. So the actual origin of this ancient knowledge isn't the ancient rishis. It's in fact God. And this is represented by the deity Lord Dakshinamurti on altars. Sri Dakshinamurti is the chosen deity of Arshavidya, chosen by Puja Swamiji himself. In the middle of the lineage is Sri Shankaracharya. So we will be looking a little into who is Shankaracharya. We call him Shankaracharya, the teacher Shankara. And this prayer carries on with concluding to our own Acharya, our own teachers, ending with one revering the lineage of teachers. We envisage a chain that's made of many links. If you remove any single link, the chain's going to break. Yeah? Because the strength of a chain depends on its weakest link. And what would it be like if there is no link? So this prayer begins by acknowledging an unbroken chain of teachers, which begins with the ancient rishis receiving the teachings from God. They passed on this great wisdom over many years. And then comes a great teacher called Shankaracharya. He lived about 1200 years ago. So we have to think, how many more teachers have come since, leading to our own teachers? So with that prayer, we will now begin the class. Shankaracharya has wrote many works that are very profound and also very long. In particular, there is one text that is very, very popular. It is called Viveka Chudamani. It's essentially a Vedanta teaching manual. If we were to study that text, it would take us years. It takes about 5 years to go through the Bhagavad Gita in weekly classes. If Swami Therapananda teaches it, as an example. Viveka Chudamani, it's much larger, so it would take more than 5 years to go through it. So this is why Swami Ramananda has taught some amount of short teachings for some. An important point to make is just because they are short, that doesn't mean they are not deep and valuable. Sanskrit scholars, they always use the same two words to describe his writings, Shankaracharya's. Clear is the first one, and it's useful to point out that due to the subject matter that that we are discussing, it's always possible that the teacher may not at times be making things clear. Very humble observation. Swami Ramananda admits this himself, that it may be with his own teachings. And I, of course, I'm a really new teacher, also suggest this for mine. Apologize. One thing that Shankaracharya is renowned for is that his teachings are clear, really clear. The subject matter we are looking at, it's not ordinary, it's not an ordinary subject matter. It's the most profound subject matter. And this is because it's talking about the reality of the universe, the reality of you and me, the reality of God. And it reveals that it is the one and same reality. That there is one reality because of which you and I exist, and one reality because of which God exists, called Brahman. Despite being profound, Shankaracharya does make this very clear. The second word used to describe Shankaracharya's works is profundity. If we want to know something important about his history, Swami Tarapananda says the most important thing is this: prior to Sri Shankaracharya, were there other great teachers? There has to have been many, of course, but how many of their names do you know? How many of their texts are studied regularly? Isn't that really strange? The lineage goes back thousands of years before Sri Shankara, Shankaracharya lived 1200 years ago, while the ancient rishis, they lived thousands of years ago. What happened to all those great teachers? We know of many of the teachers after him because we study the texts. But before Shankaracharya, there's almost nothing, only a few. What happened is that his teachings are so clear and profound that all the other stuff got forgotten about. In fact, his teachings are so great that he completely outshined all those that came before. There are 6 texts of Shankaracharya that Swami Tharatmananda has taught that are online, which means, I think actually now there's 7, including Atma Bodha, which means I have his permission to teach those texts, his online material. The first is Sadhana Panchakam, 5 verses on sadhana. This isn't just an outline for a class or sadhana. This is an outline for your life. It's that deep and profound. An outline for your life, a life of sadhana. This gives simple yet profound instructions on how to live a life of sadhana, a life of spiritual growth. Panchakam is a set of 5 verses on sadhana, spiritual practice. Another name for this in English is ladder, around 38 or 40 steps that culminate in enlightenment. The text has another name, however, the spiritual teaching of the 5 jewels. Oh, excuse me, a bit tired today. It's that kind of weather, really. Irish rain. As we can see, it builds one line upon the other. It starts by saying one is to study the Vedas, and this is to be done daily. It's the first instruction by Shankaracharya. The text ends by saying, after death, may you remain non-separate from Para Brahman. We can almost become used to suffering. Isn't that true? Though the first verse is going to show us that that the time to do something about it is now, not later now. Though, how is Shankaracharya going to help us with this forest fire of samsara? And it is a fire. For the sake of putting out the fire, the solution isn't water. Surprisingly, the solution is Atmayanam, the nectar of the teachings of self-knowledge. This wisdom is the means to gaining happiness. If we are in a world of suffering, we look for a means to happiness. That means is Vedanta. We it would be useful to look at the meaning of the word sadhana. Sadhana is not just spiritual. Sadhana means that which is required as the mean to the goal, any goal. Sadhana is a means to an end. But what means? To be happy and content. And to date, how many sadhanas have we embarked upon for happiness and contentment? Millions, yeah? And not one of them has brought lasting contentment, has it? Not lasting contentment. Since we know that to date nothing we have done has been successful, then it's reasonable to assume that the next 10 or 20 years will be the same. So, what you think is sadhana, it's not. What you think is a means to an end is not. A life of contentment and peace is not working, is it? Well, you wouldn't be watching this. We are talking about worldly approaches, and we should take a spiritual approach. It's a way of finding freedom from suffering, or a way of finding contentment, happiness, and peace. So, yeah, it says that we should study the Veda every day, but we have to be really careful here, guys, in case we make a mistake. Some people think that all they have to do is to be a good person and live a good life. And by doing that, they will gain contentment and happiness in life. That if they are a spiritual person, if they only do good deeds, I will be blessed. I will find peace and contentment in life. Does this philosophy work? Yeah, look, it sounds beautiful, but people who have led a good life, do people like that suffer? Of course they do. We all suffer. Not one of us is going to be exempt from the human reality of suffering. Not one of us. No matter how good or spiritual we are still subject to the same suffering as anyone else. This is why Vedanta Pramana is universal. Because the problem is universal. Okay? We don't want the spiritual idealizing. Indian people have a different problem than, say, Western people. No. Same problem. In the second line, it says that Dharma, living a pious life, is not enough to free you from suffering. At best, it's going to make you suffer less in the next life. But what about now? I don't want peace in the next life. I want peace now. If we are content and peaceful, we are going to be a blessing to others. So we want it not for ourselves and for others. Dharma can never be a source of peace and contentment. Why? Because of impermanence. Your good deeds, they are finite, or are they finite or infinite? They are finite, yeah, limited. Are your good deeds finite in magnitude or infinite in magnitude? they are also finite, limited, which means the fruits of those are finite also. Your good deeds are limited, and the fruits of those are limited, and not the problem. Any number of finite or limited deeds will always be finite or limited. Always. Our worldly limited actions cannot bring limitlessness, what we seek, fullness and peace. This is very, very important. If we go back to the first line, it is saying, may the Vedas be studied every day. The Vedas, they are the source text for Hinduism. If you ignore the Vedas, you are ignoring what Hinduism is based on. What does study mean, though? Many people recite Vedic hymns every day, but they recite them without understanding a single word that's being said. Even the Gayatri mantra, it's a Vedic mantra. You will have heard this before. In fact, a lot of people who are chanting this mantra, they don't even know who it is addressed to. Yeah. Half of the people that chant this mantra, they think this is addressed to Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas, since it's her mantra. But the truth is that the mantra has got nothing to do with Gayatri. Nothing. It's a mantra to Surya called Savata in this prayer. If you're chanting or studying something and don't understand what it is you're studying, it's silly, isn't it? You're not even scratching the surface. So what this means is a proper in-depth study of Veda. In your home, you should have a special time set aside, and that special time should of course consist of prayer, meditation and study. It doesn't have to be an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't have to be. Even 10 minutes is fine. Yeah. If that's all that's available, it's no problem. It's very beneficial. But it should be every day. Okay. Line 2 mentions karma. Karma. Karma here means rituals. Most of the Veda is a manual on rituals. Rituals which are meant to be performed well. In modern times, though, we don't do Vedic rituals. Does that mean we are contrary to what Shankaracharya is saying? Not at all. Thousands of years ago, rituals were the primary mode of prayer. This is the main form of prayer and worship. But today, for example, we have puja. Recitation is done as a form of prayer, and these actually must be done. What is prayer done properly? Well, we can first say what is prayer done improperly. Let's say the person starts the day by 108 recitations on mala, on beads. After the 4th or 5th bead, their mind is already wandering. Maybe they begin to think about all the things they have to do that day. So, so this isn't performed properly. The emphasis here is on prayer and worship done properly. We're going to set aside the rest of this verse for the next class, um, as there are a lot of Vedantic teachings. So the essence of this opening of Sadhana Panchakam is to live a prayerful life, as it is important for two reasons, guys. The first is that we need all the help we can get. So we invoke Ishvara's, God's blessings. In spiritual life, we need all the help we can get, or we will get lost without God's help. Also, this is very important, prayer softens the ego in preparation for freedom. To handle the ego, it's central. It's a central part of Vedanta sadhana. It's very important.